Good morning, fellow Toastmasters and potential Toastmasters. Welcome to Wake Up with Toastmasters. I am your host, Ken Richardson. I am your District 115 Club Growth Director. And with me today is my co-host, the lovely Phyllis Tribby, distinguished Toastmaster and past District Governor. Good morning, Phyllis.
Good morning, Ken, and good morning to our public out there. I hope everyone is doing fantastic. This is going to be a great show. We're going to talk about women's history today. So while Ken looks at his screens and be sure that everything is A-OK with Facebook and questions are wanted, say hello. Are you ready to go, Ken?
We are ready, Phyllis. We are online. We are on our Facebook page, and we are ready to take some questions. As you mentioned, we are going to talk about International Women's Day because March 8th is International Women's Day. And as I was telling you earlier, you are wearing the colors of International Women's Day, purple, green, and white. I think there's a little white in there, but I'll explain what those colors mean. And of course, I'm going to pull up a PowerPoint, exactly. Let me see if I can share my screen here, because I did a little research on International Women's Day, and I wanted to tie it back to Toastmasters. Can you see that okay?
Yes, we can.
Looks like we're coming on. There we are on our, there's a little bit of a delay as it's posting and updating on our Facebook page. So anyway, International Women's Day. It was established in 1910. Let's go take a look. This is Clara Zetkin. Now, Clara, of course, is no longer with us, but she is the founder of International Women's Day. And you're probably thinking, well, how did this come about? Well, it grew out of the labor movement in 1910. What was happening in 1910? Well, women were starting to assert themselves in politics and economics and the workforce, and they were demanding at the time shorter working hours, better pay, and the right to vote. And of course, even today, if you look at data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, better pay remains an issue. Women are in the workforce, of course. We're happy for that. But there are still pay disparities. I think the last statistic I saw was it was like 75 to 80 cents on the dollar that women make compared to men in the same profession. Now, let's see, Phyllis, I think you've been a woman for a long
time. You haven't noticed that, right?
Well, tell me, what is your perspective over the years? You've been part of the workforce. Have you experienced the kind of discrimination that has been so prevalent throughout our 200 plus year history in the United States against women?
I think each woman that sees it that goes into the workforce, when you go into the workforce, you notice what is available, especially in large corporations. I started my work career in a large corporation. When I graduated from high school, you either got married or you did secretarial work, or there was always telephone operator. I went for telephone operator, found out that there was a multitude of office work that did not include typing and shorthand. And so I started out in an office with many other women who were regulated by a woman. There was a woman in charge of our group, but there were no women above her. There were only men. Each time we would see a group going through of president, VP and various officers in the corporation. If there was a woman there, she was taking notes of what the men were saying. She was not part of the group that was actually learning what was going on in our offices. So men only were above the first level of management.
I can relate to that because my
Yeah.
wife, oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. And so you see it when you first start in. It's like, well, all of a sudden you're no longer can attain other than the first level of management. You see it and you think, well, I'm not going to go any further.
Well, you know, my wife and I, we got married in 1981. And prior to that, as she was growing up, she was in Catholic grade school, Catholic high school. There's a pattern here. And growing up, she thought there were only like 3 options available to her. She could be a nun, she could be a teacher, she could be for a secretary, or she could be a nurse. She decided she wanted to be a nurse, and she thought those were the only options from which she could select. Now, she's a very good nurse. She's retired now. But at the time, she had no other options to consider. That was what she learned in school, was available to her as a woman. And I mean, she's a very bright lady and could have been a doctor. So, but the one thing I want to point out here, this was 1910 when the movement was involved in establishing or trying to establish women's rights, but it wasn't adopted by the United Nations until 1975. And as you and I discussed earlier, 1975 seems like just yesterday. And I'm thinking, really? It took that long to recognize International Women's Day? And then, as you pointed out, Jimmy Carter made it Women's Month. So there was a recognition there in the Carter administration that we needed to do more to encourage equity and build equity into the law, actually. So what's it all about? What is International Women's Day? Well, obviously, it's a day to celebrate how far women have come in a variety of fields, including society, politics, economics. However, as far as we've come, I don't think we are quite there yet. And I remember reading an article that talked about convincing men to support women's rights. And it said the most important thing that happens to a man causing him to support women's rights is having a daughter. What do you think, fellas? Does that make a difference?
Well, I don't have a daughter, but I would say absolutely. All parents want absolutely the best that their children can achieve. And to know that their daughter did not get a particular promotion because she is a woman or was not accepted into the school or college of her choice, or because of her gender, would make men strike out for sure.
That's absolutely true. I have a daughter. We just have one child, a daughter. Of course, she's in her mid-30s now, but throughout her life, we've always tried to teach her that she is a strong, independent person, regardless of her gender, and that she was capable of doing whatever she really wanted to do. So we're very proud of her today. She is a very independent person, and she is a videographer, and she had her own company for a while, but she now works for a company based in Sun Valley, Idaho, where she lives, that primarily focuses on internet marketing. And she does a lot of video shoots. And of course, prior to that, when she was independent, she had an opportunity to travel to pretty much around the world, many different locations around the world, participating in some nonprofit type of video shoots. So we're very, very proud of that fact that she has not stood still or allowed men to define her. And I think we're very, very proud of that fact. So taking a look at some of the things that we've talked about, you probably noticed that all of my PowerPoint slides today have purple and green in them. And that's the reason for that is purple, green, and white are the colors of International Women's Day. And I noticed that you're wearing today those colors, purple and green. And here's why March 8th and why these colors were selected. So I mentioned that the movement, actually that we're talking about, the labor movement here, started in 1910, but it wasn't until 1917 that a specific date was selected as International Women's Day. And the reason for it, again, Russian women were demanding what they called bread and peace. Russia was at war and they wanted peace and they wanted bread, food on the table. So eventually, the Russian Tsar at the time acquiesced to the demands of the women. And therefore, March 8th, starting in 1917, became the day that symbolizes women's struggles. And the colors, purple stands for justice and dignity, green for hope, and white is purity. What do you think? Did they do a good job of wrapping this up here, Phyllis?
I think there were many brains that were working on this slogan and information to us, and they did an excellent job.
I think so too. I'm just still astonished that here we are in 2022, and we still don't have, we still have biases in a lot of different arenas, and in the workplace, particularly for women of color who are disadvantaged even more so. I mentioned it was about 80 cents a dollar overall for women. For women of color, it's about 75 cents or something like that. It's much lower. So I think those disparities give us cause to continue to work on getting justice and dignity and hope for equality. And we'll talk about here, I think in the next slide coming up, it is the 2022 theme. The UN, the United Nations, said their theme and wish is gender equality today for a sustainable tomorrow. And they tied that into climate change and trying to get the women's movement to get behind climate change and really push it. However, if you go to the IWD website, which is down here, it's www.internationalwomensday.com, the actual theme that they have decided on is break the bias. I don't know if you can see that very well. That's probably not the best color, but it is.
You need the green here.
Yes, I do. Break the bias, hashtag break the bias. Asking people to imagine a world free of bias, stereotypes, and discrimination. So that to me, I think is the first order of business, a world that's free of bias, stereotype, and discrimination. And I know that, women have experienced this type of bias and stereotype and discrimination in the workforce, and it continues today. Do you think we've come a long way, Phyllis, or where are we?
Oh my, we have come miles and miles and miles. But it's a great goal. And thing of it is there are always going to be people in the world that have the discrimination. But all we can do is work toward those goals and making things that are free of bias. We see more and more stay-at-home fathers nowadays than we used to. My feeling was always, I'm a great worker. I hate anything to do with the household. I loved having a stay-at-home husband. So yeah, whatever works for the family. Don't just stereotype people. Take the best of what's offered you and lead with that.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out because interestingly enough, my mother going back, and she was very traditional. You know, she's deceased now, of course. Both my parents are deceased, but she was very, very traditional. Never worked outside the home, but you know, was the traditional housewife. And I think it's important to see now that roles are changing. When I was in the military, for example, this was, you know, in the late 60s and early 70s, we were starting to see changes. I was in the medical field, a surgical technician, and it was very unusual at the time to see male nurses. You know, I mentioned that Jan's a nurse, but that has been changing, or female doctors. We had a few, but not many. And today, however, I've looked at some of the statistics, and it's really fascinating. More and more women have gone to medical school. And in fact, most recent data, they slightly outnumber the men. It's like 51%, you know, 49% of new medical school students are female. And of course, on the other side of that, you know, nursing, being a nurse, was always considered a female profession. And I remember my days in the military, that was kind of in the 60s, late 60s, early 70s. Yes, there were, I can't even remember until much later when men were starting to become nurses. And there was, you know, sort of this groundbreaking change. It was always assumed that there was something wrong with a male nurse. They were probably gay or something like that. It was unbelievable. And you're right, that has changed. It's still not up to where we would like it to be. But looking on, let's talk about Toastmasters. You've been in Toastmasters 20 some years?
25.
25. I've been in about 15. Have you seen changes in Toastmasters over the years?
When you go to the conferences now, yes, there are many, many men at the international conference, but when you go to a district conference, you can kind of see how there are becoming as many women as there are men at these conferences. So I believe what we're finding is that women are volunteering for the leadership roles in Toastmasters, where the men, not so much. I think more women are volunteering and we're getting more women leaders.
I think that's very perceptive of you. And let me give you some data to back up what you have observed. First, women were not admitted as members in Toastmasters until 1973. Again, that's a bit of a shocker. I'm old enough I was still in the military in 1973. And honestly, it seems very, very recent for women to have been admitted. But the 70s was a time of change. And I looked, and there were many organizations that throughout the 70s began to change their bylaws and started allowing women, and of course, Toastmasters was part of that. Today, I just looked at this, it's on the TI website, 54% of all Toastmasters throughout the world are women. Are you surprised by that, Phyllis?
I say what I'm seeing is more women in every Toastmaster group that I go to. Where when I started out back in, what was that, 97, 98, probably 50-50 for men and women. Now the groups that I go to seem to have more women in them than men.
I think this is an impressive gain from 0% in 1972 to 54% today of all Toastmasters are women. So that's an impressive gain.
Ken, could it be the old thing about women ask for help and men don't?
Well, it could be. Now that's a little stereotypical.
Not what
yes,
we're supposed to be talking about today, but maybe it is. Women are realizing that they can use the help that Toastmasters can give.
Well, certainly there have been studies that show women are actually better communicators than men. They are more socially oriented than men. And that may make them better leaders because we've had, since 1973, 7 international presidents that are women, or 6 women who've won the World Championship of Public Speaking. The current international president, the first vice president, the second vice president are all women. Now, the president-elect is a man, but still the representation of women in the highest levels of leadership within Toastmasters is very impressive. And I just have to look at Jennifer's thought here. She says, hey, women power. So I love to hear that perspective. Absolutely. I'm all for it, because in a moment, I want to take a look at District 115 and see how do we look when it comes to the way women are treated and accepted and what have you. But clearly, from the perspective of positive change for women within Toastmasters, I think we are way ahead of the curve. I'll use that. We have a club ahead of the curve.
I'd like to make a comment. I believe you said 7 women international presidents since 73. Have there not been 3 in the last 10 years?
That sounds about right. Yes,
Yeah,
we've had
3 in the last 10 years.
Yeah, so we've had a lot very recently, and if you look at the way things are moving up, the first vice president and second vice president, both women, lovely people, the current international president. So there's a lot of progress that has been made, and clearly, women in leadership, particularly in Toastmasters, are more accepted, and that's the way it should be. I mean, I have no problem at all. Of course, as we talked about, coming from a military background, all I remember is not necessarily that my superior officers were women, but just that they were my superior officers. So they were, lieutenant commanders and commanders and admirals. So a little bit different. Now, when it comes to Region 2, as you know, we are in Region 2. The international director who represents Region 2 right now is a woman, Kathy Hughes. Both Region 2 advisors, we have 2 region advisors, and both of them are women. So I think when you look at Toastmasters overall, you can see we have made some progress. Now, what about District 115? Let me check here. Jennifer, good. I appreciate her perspective. What do you think about 115? Do you think we've done a good job so far? We're a very young district, but have we been open and accepting of our gender equality and eliminating biases, do you think?
Of course we have. We live with integrity, and District 115 certainly demonstrates integrity in the core values of Toastmasters International. So I don't believe that there would be any bias.
I would agree with you. Let's look. 2 of the 3 members of the trio are women. So there's the top 3 in the district. The immediate past district director, our administration manager, and our public relations manager, Jennifer Smith, who's online with us right now, are all women. 2 of the 4 division directors are women, so 50-50 split right there. And 9 of 15 current area directors are women. So I think we've done a pretty good job on eliminating bias in our elections and our process, because pretty much all of these are elected positions. So as you know, the district council and the district executive committee elect the slate of officers to the division level, and they confirm the area directors. So I think there's a good showing here, looking at these numbers of what we've become over time, and that is not, I don't know that we're completely there, but we certainly are way above where you might expect or you might find other organizations. So I'm going to shut up and let you talk. We still have a few minutes left here, but I just simply want to say to all of the women out there and the men, you notice this one picture, I found these pictures online at the International Women's Day website, and you notice the hands there are sort of, that's a W for women. And this one man here who says, I challenge gender stereotypes, discrimination and bias, and then this year's theme, break the bias. So give me your perspective, Phyllis, on where we are in terms of women's rights and equality.
Well, first I'd like to mention that Toastmasters is a volunteer organization. And looking at how many women we have compared to the amount of men, yeah, it seems to me like, we're drifting over to being a women's organization. And I don't want to see that happen. I want more men to volunteer for these leadership roles. Yeah, their word, what they have to say, they've been our leaders for, since 1923. It's been a men's organization. And I don't want it to switch over. I want it to be equal. Women, men sometimes get the idea that women want to be in charge, that they don't want men around. And that's not true. We just want to have some equal rights, the rights that men have always had. Way back, couldn't even own land, please, or exert ourselves. Or like you say, it's still a possibility that women do not get paid as much, and they're doing equal work, equal pay. I do not believe that we should accept a woman because she's a woman and not qualified. She has to be equally qualified to receive those benefits. But as I say, again, Toastmasters is a volunteer organization. The men out there need to come forth and volunteer for some of these positions.
Absolutely.
Let the women walk away with all of the jobs and the leadership roles.
So all you men out there, listen to Phyllis and step up. Step up.
That's it. We need the information. We need the thoughts and the steadfast information that comes from both genders. We
Exactly.
need to have everything equal, and we can't be
diversity is important.
Volunteer.
Diversity is important.
Yes.
It makes us a better organization, and I love the fact that we are an international organization. Well, we are almost out of time. I do want to remind people that this Saturday we have another contest coming up for many of the areas in B and I think C1 this weekend. I'd have to look at it. I forgot to put my calendar out today. But in any event, if you have questions about the upcoming contest, shoot me an email at d115cgd@gmail.com. Please come out and support our contestants and our area directors, all of whom and division directors who've worked so hard to make contest season a pleasure. If you'd like to be a guest on Wake Up with Toastmasters, again, send me an email. Or if you have any questions, let me know. Do you have anything that you want to wrap up with there, Phyllis?
Well, our next guest on Thursday will be District 33 Club Quality Director, Debbie Altman, and she's going to tell us what's happening in District 33, when their contests are, information that's going on, because most of us have been members of District 33. I think I was there for 22 years. So I like to know what's happening in District 33. So please tune in and listen to Debbie.
Absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up, Phyllis, because when I started Toastmasters, we were part of District 33. So I still have many, many friends in District 33, and it's always a pleasure. They're sort of like our sister, parent, or I don't know. Yeah. In any event, thanks everyone for joining us today. Hopefully you learned a little bit about International Women's Day and the struggles that our female companions have had over the years and where we stand today. We're much better off, of course, than we were in 1973, but we could still do better. So thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful day, and we will see you back here on Thursday. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
I can find the right button. Here we go.